So I kind of have a new title for this, Mobilizing Physical Literacy. And I'd like to kind of think about that word, motility or mobilizing. To mobilize, to move, to breathe life into. I begin this inquiry with the intention of mobilizing conceptions of physical literacy. It is, after all, a well-defined and established concept, made known to many of us through the dedication of physical education and phenomenological scholar Margaret Whitehead. Within Canada, for example, physical literacy has become a common term among physical education researchers, teachers, and coaches, as it has become a desired learning outcome in many provincial curricula and an identified stage on the long-term athlete development model. But if you permit me a moment of suspended or bracketed reality, I invite you to put your prior knowledge of physical literacy aside and consider what it might be like to examine the concept with fresh eyes, without the bounded constraints of academia and established pedagogical practice, and assume the attitude of a phenomenologist. Phenomenology, as Maurice Merleau-Ponty explains, is a study of essences, the essence of perception or the essence of consciousness. It is also a philosophy which puts essences back into existence. Exploring a concept such as physical literacy phenomenologically means that you evoke a sense of imagination and possibility in exploring what it is and might become. I will know that I have accomplished my task if I have left you with a desire to continue to question, if you have begun to think differently about something that you have taken for granted. In short, I'm not here today to give you answers, rather a structure or a springboard from which you might dive further as we entertain the possibility of mobilizing thinking that pertains to a phenomena rooted in the essence of motility itself. So I invite you to orient yourselves to physical literacy. Maybe you're just hearing it today for the first time. I know there's quite a few of you in the room that are physical education teacher educators, so whatever it is that you maybe come to this room with, your prior knowledge, I just want you to remember the day that you first heard that word. And what ran through your mind? Where were you? What images surfaced? And what feelings were evoked? And what assumptions did you make? To be honest, when I first heard the term, I recall a palatable distaste. Images of reading books came into my mind, and postures of sitting, hunched over a desk, paired with sensations of discomfort, even anguish. For sitting at a desk, whether reading or writing, is something that can fixate my attention, hold me captive in one spot, and constrain me from what it is I like to do more than anything else on this earth: move. I still, even now as a tenured professor, writhe before I write. As one who is predisposed to losing herself in a prolonged moment, it is common for hours to fly by as I sit in thought, mull over and spill out words onto a screen. Similar to the flow experiences reported by athletes, my discomfort from prolonged sitting, apart from the time I endured and rehabilitated 2 disc injuries, only comes into my peripheral field once my bout of writing comes to an end. In sum, what surfaced for me were literal associations with the concept of print literacy, and I was unable at first to match the notion of being physical with literacy whatsoever. Now I have a paragraph here about multiliteracy theories, but I'm not going to read that. I'm just going to then go to this notion of animating literacy, and I'm inspired very much by the work of David Abram. David Abram, a cultural ecologist and phenomenologist who is very much influenced by the philosophy of Merleau-Ponty, traces the historic roots of literacy from ancient hieroglyphics, oral cultures, to our modern-day depiction of disembodied letters glowing on a screen. His seminal books, The Spell of the Sensuous and Becoming Animal, are written in a way that shifts stifling conceptions of reading as a heady, sedentary phenomena to one that is very much grounded and connected to the animate earth. He reminds us that silent reading, the abstraction of language from breath, is a relatively recent development, as spaces were only inserted between words in the Middle Ages. Such spaces silenced a phonetic literacy, the need to sound out the softness of a vowel and the hardness of a consonant in order to distinguish one word from the next. Such silencing prefaced the notion that thought, as René Descartes described, could be pure and free from all physical constraint and limitation, while matter, hence the body, could be conceived of as spatially extended, determinate, and mechanical. The silencing of language thus contributes to modern-day perceptions of the human mind as being very much separate and disconnected from the earth, from others, and particularly distinct from the soundscape of the natural world. The chiasmic relationship between the flesh of the world and the flesh of our bodies that phenomenologist Merleau-Ponty puts forth is thus troubled. Thinking in a Descartesian sense severs such intertwined relations as the earth, brimming with vibrant life, is perceived as being inert and the body, a machine-like entity, as being distinct from the mind. Abram invites us to question such assumptions as he traces language back to its oral indigenous roots and reminds us of the relationship between wind and the nature of thought itself, a collective consciousness that is certainly not sequestered to one's head. Language philosophers Lakoff and Johnson, who explore the intricate relationship between the words we use in everyday life and our bodily ways of being in this world, provide another lens to view the relationship between the animate earth and the nature of thinking. Idiomatic phrases, particularly those accompanied by gesture, make evident that ideas can float over one's head or be caught. Yet this relation between thought and wind is rarely considered in theories that describe the learning process. Both Piaget and Vygotsky put forth the notion that as learners mature, thinking becomes more abstract. Words uttered on a child's tongue gradually become internalized, putting forth the notion that there is an inside, an interiority to thought. But what if we were to challenge this human-centric notion of situating language as a heady phenomena, of situating learning as the ability to engage in abstracting the sensing body from the pure mind? What Abram helps us remember is that language is a chiasmic relationship between ourselves and the world, similar to Lave and Wenger's critique of Vygotsky, that there is no distinct inside and outside, where the interiorized mind begins and the external world ends. Abram speaks of the wind that binds all earthly beings, the continual oscillation between exhaling and inhaling, offering ourselves to the world at one moment and drawing the world into ourselves at the next, affording a sense perception with a like reciprocity. So what might it be like to live life from this phenomenological frame of reference, to experience the vital presence of the earth? For some, imprisoned, held captive by the realities projected from handheld devices, this possibility is an abstraction, a fabled fabrication. Life can be planned, mechanized, predetermined, and willed into linear, pre-directed action. A hardening exists, a thickening of the Merleau-Pontian flesh that folds over and seeps back onto itself. The question I ask and the challenge I put forth is this: how might we teach in a way that evokes a perceptual connection between self, other, and world? In practical terms, how might movement, experienced within the discipline of physical education, put children more in touch with themselves, their classmates, and their environment? Now there's lots of stuff here. I'm not going to read, but I am going to ask you just for a moment to just stand up. And then when you're ready, you can relax and Susan will take over. I'll write that. You can. Okay, I'll write the words. You take over.
Okay. I'll just sit down for a moment. Yeah, just relax for a minute. I wasn't going to do this because we didn't choreograph this, but I like my tricks. As long as there's no width, we're okay. It's not having its way today. The wand, waving the magic wand. I also like to think of it as spelling. Spelling. Okay. The spell of the sensuous was David Abrams' term for his book. Spell is in the word spelling. And what are these F words we want to spell? Function, form, feeling, and flow. Can you spell those words? How do we normally spell them? What imagination, what animation is in those words? So what you just did, standing up, can we just focus on that moment? And I want you to go on that moment when you sat down and you resumed your place. There was the direction to stand up. What did you experience when you resumed your place? Nothing. Something.
Familiarity.
Yeah.
I went back to where I was.
Yeah. Back to where you were. Yeah. Resuming the place. Sitting down. Daniel Stern writes about the moment in psychotherapy. There was a whole practice, existential psychotherapy. Gives a lot of attention to the importance of the moment, its affective dynamics, its kinetic, kinesthetic, affective dynamics. Life is made up of moments. Okay? Moments become durations, patterns, rhythms. So what's in that moment? So back to that moment of sitting down. What else?
I appreciated the change and
Right.
getting a little bit of a stretch, a
Right.
shift in my body, and then I could sit again and refocus.
Yeah. So can you go back to that moment? Daniel Stern would actually have people re-examine, have an interview around that moment, and see what it was comprised of. So what was the moment of sitting down? Standing up. Was there a different qualitative dynamic to sitting down? They don't want me to do anything like after all.
I think it was shifting moment.
Yes.
Or the same moment from different point of view.
Yes. Same moment. Yes. So kind of literally sitting down, maybe an up and an ebb.
I think, like you alluded to, a bit of relief.
Relief. Yeah.
Yeah, that you weren't
Yeah.
going to be put on the spot.
So an actual like
Yeah.
release, exploration. Yeah. Holding it tight. Yeah. Sit down.
When I was sitting down, I realized my butt was about to hit the cushion and my back was about to hit the back, and I was going to be supported. And I also noticed, oh, it's warm because I was just sitting here a moment ago.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I had to, to ease those anxieties.
Exactly. Yes. Sitting down. What did you say, Tim?
Familiarity.
Familiarity. Yeah. The warmth of the seat. I like that. It's good. The warmth of the seat. Yeah.
But it's sad actually when we had to sit down. I thought we
Oh.
were giving up to play. And then before we even got started playing, we'll sit down again.
Actually, kind of detrimental.
Should I have some discount?
Yeah. Well, so I guess that first word, function, it's a puzzling word. We wonder what is functional? Like what in the human world and the more than human world is simply functional? And how come, just a critical note, how come we spend a lot of our professional time talking about functional things as if that's all it is? And we teach in functional ways, and we teach generic skills as if that's a function that can be assumed regardless of form, regardless of the person, regardless of the personality, regardless of the context. That was more than just function. That excluding. So you spoke eloquently and moved eloquently to that in the presentation. Thank you for that. Yeah. So function, it just is a puzzling word because we use it so much. And so much of our physical activity is about focusing in on the functional terms, the skills.
The way you're talking about it right now, to me, it's kind of just a beginning.
Yeah.
Like
Thank you.
and it's only a beginning.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
So let's not have the halving of the categories, right?
Yeah.
And take all the spell out of any of those words. So how else can we spell function? Thank you for that, yes. So yeah, why can't it be a starting point? Why can't it be an entry point? So there's a thing to do, there's a function, there's a kinesiology to it, there's an anatomy, there's a physiology bound up in it. Yeah, we need that. We need to be attentive at some level. But what does that then allow us to do?
It allows you then to work on form.
Exactly, thank you.
And when you're like, alluding to soccer, once you get to higher level sports, it's all about feeling and flow.
Thank you.
You know, it can't be about just function anymore, because if you're caught in function, you're caught in thought.
Yes.
And if you're caught in thought, you're always going to be behind.
Yeah, thank you. We're done.
Okay.
You're gonna have to prepare after
So,
this.
I'd like you to squat 10 times, please. Can you squat?
Squat, I mean, it's the same thing, sitting, standing, but we just did language. This is about physical literacy, so we're playing on languaging. The language often, I used to be a personal trainer and a personal educator of training. And we kind of speak of in the gym, particularly from a very functional frame of reference. You know, we like to label the muscles. I look at the comfort of illiteracy of the muscles in my student teachers. They're elementary generalists, and they have me for 5 weeks. And I ask them, you know, well, can you talk about the muscles? Can you name the muscles? No. And they're okay with that. They're in teachers' college, and they're very comfortable not even having the language of the body. But if we look critically at that language, it's based on dead body anatomy. I mean, it doesn't have the whole vibrancy. But I guess it's a starting point, right? So what are the muscles? If they're personal trainers, you must have that language. What contracts, what extends. And, you know, we kind of stay external. You'll get the basic kind of movement into form. But we'll come back to the squat. But there's something when you kind of take it into other contexts, such as ballet. There's the plie. Now, if I'm teaching a squat in the gym, I teach the squat the same way I would teach the plie, because I used to be a professionally trained ballet dancer. And if you're my personal training client, when I used to work full-time at the fitness group, my clients would walk around and they would know who their trainer was. Like, oh, you work with Rebecca. Because I would take that amount of care into how I would teach and how I would form and shape. Stephen, did you want to talk a little bit about your horse, the squat on the horse, and the nuances of that? I want to
So let's try the position of wonderful alignment on our heels. So your feet pointing directly forward, shoulder width apart, and a half squat. And just think of that alignment through your back, just extending up as if you had a cord. Maybe just pulling the center of your scalp upwards, just extending. Lower the shoulders, relax those shoulders. Take them back slightly, maybe on your haunches, on your thighs there. Just hold that, relax that position. Straighten that spine when you can, extend it. And there you get wonderful alignment. So you've got a plumb line now from your shoulder, your hip, right through to your ankle. You've got almost an immovable stance, a wonderfully responsive stance. You can even rock a little sideways and still hold that wonderful alignment. You're now sitting on a horse. The horse goes in any direction, and you're staying in this wonderful alignment. The horse can spin, and you're still holding that alignment. Please. Yeah. Thank you. So the horse riding stance, not ballet, horse riding stance. It takes a lifetime to gain that stance on a horse. Imagine that, standing by sitting on a horse. The greatest riders in the world have that wonderful stance with that plumb line through. An incredibly sculpted form that has a beautiful function and a wide range of functions associated with it that allows them to feel the creature underneath them, the world.
And I would say it takes a lifetime to learn the ideal plie and tendu. If you look at a professional ballerina, they never miss that step. They never miss their plie and tendu. They don't just go to the tricks, warm up and do their fancy pirouettes. There's the time dedication in every single ballet class to go to the nuanced plie. But if we go back to a function of sitting and standing and what we see now in the gym, we have these proprioceptive modalities. So the question is, if we're looking at disciplining the body and disciplining the form, and how I was taught, and by the way, you have permission now to sit or stand in this role. It's about invitation, right? And I don't mind if you stand, I don't mind if you do this or this. Like some of Saul's movements, they were really cool. So it's the pedagogy, right? I mean, what's the pedagogy of moving into this form? I mean, talk about whipping into shape. In dance, that very much was whipped into that plie form. We were playing with horse whips. Some horses are whipped into that form. But yeah, how can we get to this sensitivity in something like a squat in perhaps more of a proprioceptive way? How can we feel our way into the form? And when we think about flow and flowing into the world, well, it's just interesting. So if you work with a client, I could kind of line them up and tell them from an external frame of reference how to fix and how to get into the posture. But now we have things like wobble boards or balls or things that offer the undulations of the natural world, right? So that environmental connection. And if you can just find, right? If you squat and every squat has a nuance, right? So when I look at people in the gym, what you think is linear up and down or a sit-up, there's always a little spiraling journey if you really look at the nuances of movement. And you might have a bum that sticks out, a weak glute med, and you might not even know that you have I'm exaggerating, right? But it's that playfulness of the modality that brings you into form. So with that kind of bump, which is, I'm excited by that. I think there's other ways to playfully move with each other. And Stephen's written a little piece in a journal I put together about interactivity. So not just daily physical activity, but notion of interactivity. So interacting with the world or interacting with horses or interacting with each other. So we invite you now, maybe Stephen and I will demonstrate, to just leave you.
We call this squatophilia.
Yeah, the squatophilia. So to kind of feel the squat that you might do alone, but then how could you just kind of feel the perturbations, the moving in response. It's kind of like from running on a treadmill where you disconnect mind from sensing body, to what it's like to running outside with rocks and roots and mud, and what's it like to squat with someone who's like pushing or pulling or twisting, and to just playfully move into that. I'm feeling my core. No one's whipping me, pulling your navel. It just kind of comes out of that moment. So let's do it. Let's just stand up. You don't have to take off your clothes. And that's a joke. It's a joke. But
shoes and socks are common.
shoes and socks are fine. And just find someone. And I'm here if you want a partner and can't find one. And just explore an interactive squat. Oh, very. All right. Did you want to? No, I don't have any injuries. I forced myself to buy
That's the next paper. Injury.
That's why I took the tall guy. And then whatever is emerging, see if you can either slow it down if you're quick, or if you're really slow, maybe speed it up, or gently add more pressure. Or have someone be the leader and the other the follower, but different ways to explore it. And maybe find a moment where you pause. Yeah. And if you want to, as you're doing this, shout out what you're feeling and how it changed from the initial sit and stand to squat to this. Do you want to maybe give us a bit of language around this experience for you?
How do you spell it?
Well,
Flow?
Well, we always, I went to resist, instead of just flowing, resist,
Good?
resist, right, and that's more important
Yep, yep,
for functional.
yeah.
how do you respond?
So if you were to go from action to reaction,
Okay, so Sol has said harmonious, responsive, harmonious, harmony, connection.
I'm just trying not to fall over.
Intuitive, intuitive.
Aware of.
Thank you. Okay, well, I need to be very conscious of the time. I'm reaching and then I'm not aware. So we will just close very quickly. Thank you for
playing.
playing and spelling this with us. So the ways in which we can spell these different F words and sort of broaden the oftentimes constraining notions of physical education. I just leave you with a thought, pedagogical thought. So what if we built this kind of sensitivity into some of the fundamental pedagogical actions? What would hunkering down with kids come to mean? No, I don't mean in functional form, feeling and flow. And how do we bring this sort of sensitivity beyond even the realm of physical education, daily physical activity, daily physical interaction, into the wider realm of teaching and interacting with kids? And a notion like hunkering down, which is kind of a very affective term, but it has a physicality to it. And how do we enhance that physicality, that flow, feeling, form and function, that physicality, that fundamental pedagogical notion, by bringing these sensitivities that we carry through the kinesiology, the energetics, the aesthetics, and the kinesics, which is another set of terms for these words here. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to do 2 questions?